The next Battlefield game. That's the topic of the week that a lot of the community that has played Battlefield and similar games for years is talking about, because IGN released an article from an interview they had with Vince Zampella, who's now the GM for EA Studios and is at the helm of the Battlefield franchise. But should you be excited for the next Battlefield game? And the answer is maybe. So I read through the entirety of the article and got some of the unique selling points for the next title, and I wanted to go over these key points and discuss a little bit about what I'm thinking and whether I think that the next Battlefield is actually going to be a hit and gain the trust back from the dedicated fan base that has just been let down so many times, kind of like in an abusive relationship, honestly. So one of the big things is Zampella saying that they need to go back to what made Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 so successful, and once they get that nailed down, they're going to see where they can go from there and how they can bring Battlefield to the next level. So that, as an old school veteran of Battlefield, makes me happy to hear and read, but we're not going to know until we actually have hands-on with the game if this is reflected in the next title, if they're actually going back to the roots of what made these two games so beloved amongst the community. Now, Battlefield 4 released and it was just terrible. It was just a terrible, terrible mess for many months on end, but the core of the game really resonated with a lot of the community, and once they got all those issues fixed, it was actually a good game, and it's what people wanted from a Battlefield title. Battlefield 2042, on the other hand, released, it was a buggy, broken, half-assed mess, but it didn't resonate with the Battlefield community because they had all these gimmicks in there, 128 player maps that overall wasn't popular among the players. Specialists, which I think most of the community were just like, we don't want a hero shooter, we want Battlefield, we want classes, we want people to have to work together. Albeit they did kind of go down this route for 2042, there was still the specialist gimmick, which just, in my opinion, wasn't needed. So if they actually stick to their guns and go back to what made these games great, that 3 and 4 that is, it brings me a lot of faith. So one of the next things that he says is they're going back to a modern setting and getting rid of specialists, which I just touched upon, which is absolutely fantastic, favoring the core classes that have been a staple of the Battlefield franchise for decades, except for 2042. Now, there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't stick to this. I would be highly surprised if this is just pulling the rug from under us and, oh, the next Battlefield title releases and there's actually specialists. I highly doubt it. I think that they got burned by their new idea of trying specialists, or new idea. It's not really a novel idea. A lot of games do have specialists, and the hero shooters are all the craze nowadays. Even Delta Force, which is probably one of the biggest competitors for Battlefield in recent years, has specialists. I highly doubt that Zampella would be saying something like this just to go turn around and actually have specialists in the game. So if they do go back to core classes, I'm all in. Hopefully it reflects what we had in Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, that just made those two games so fun to play. They'll also be foregoing 128 player maps in favor of more focused 64 player maps. Again, awesome to hear. When Battlefield 2042 launched, it just felt as though the maps were very bare. Not a whole lot of things were on the maps themselves. They felt very out of touch, and just they didn't have any character, as opposed to a lot of the maps that were a little bit more focused, smaller, because obviously if you only have 64 players as opposed to 128, you have smaller maps, which generally you can put more time into tailoring the flow of those maps appropriately for that player count, instead of having to build out these maps that are maybe twice or 3 times as large as a 64 player map. But you're building out these maps, you have less time to actually put assets in there and give these maps character, which is what I think a lot of the maps in 2042 lacked, was a character and proper flow. It just felt all over the place. So again, if they keep to their guns and stick to 64 player maps, I think that's going to be a step in the right direction. Now for the fluff marketing speech BS. In the investor call, Andrew Wilson stated that it's going to be one of the most ambitious projects in EA's history. We've heard this 1,000 times, and guess what? Even if it is the most ambitious project in EA's history, if you're not doing things that the Battlefield community wants and loves, it's going to be a flop. Much as we saw with 2042, with the marketing speech that they had for 2042, is like, oh my god, unprecedented scale, massive maps and combat, 128 players, and guess what? It didn't make the game better. it didn't provide the Battlefield experience that players expect from this franchise. So again, marketing talk is just sometimes a load of crap, if I can be completely honest. So with what he's saying, I would take it with a grain of salt. It's just to make the investors happy and the shareholders happy. If, oh my god, they're going to have this massive project, we're going to make so much money, you know? So anyways, moving on from that, Zampella also stated that when players want a different experience, they shouldn't need to leave Battlefield. Now, even though there are 4 studios working on this title, so DICE, Motive, Ripple Effect, and Criterion, it still worries me that if they're trying to make a Battlefield game that caters to everyone, they might be defocused from the main goal of keeping to that core Battlefield. So this brings me a little bit of skepticism as to whether or not they're going to be focusing on making the core multiplayer experience great before branching off into these other experiences that people might want to have in Battlefield, like Hazard Zone, that pretty much nobody played and it just dropped not too long after the release of 2042. Portal was great, but again, it lacked a lot of love, and they should have put a lot more work and time into that, as opposed to working on modes that people don't go to the Battlefield franchise for. So this makes me a little bit weary and worried about the next Battlefield title and the focus that they might have if they're trying to develop a lot of different experiences within the title itself. The next Battlefield is currently in weekly playtesting internally. No news whatsoever as to what year the game might release in. In the thumbnail I put 2025 because it's what I would expect. 2042 released in 2021, so that would have given them a 4-year development cycle, which is in fact one of the longest dev cycles for a Battlefield game we've seen in recent years, even like the past decade. So that brings me a lot of hope that the game will release functioning and not being a half-ass broken buggy mess like 2042, Battlefield 5. Battlefield 1 was actually great. It released and it was functioning and everything was awesome. It was a fantastic game. Battlefield 4 released, it was a just garbage broken mess as well. So hopefully this longer development cycle allows them to release a product that's actually functioning on release rather than having to fix it for 6 months and putting all of the like future development of content aside to fix the issues of the game itself. Who knows, it might even release in 2026. We have absolutely no idea. That would give it a 5-year dev cycle and that would be absolutely insane. But my stance is cautious optimism. With Zampella at the helm, it's awesome. New leadership, wanting to go back to the core Battlefield experience. But with some of the things that were said in the article, it makes me a little bit worried and not going like 100% on the hype train, which I don't think anybody should be with the Battlefield franchise at this point in time, considering the past releases of the game. Once we get our hands on the beta, I'll be able to, build a better opinion of whether or not it's going to be what the Battlefield community wants and or needs, or what I want from the Battlefield franchise and the next Battlefield title. Really be cautious. I wouldn't pre-order until you actually get your hands on the game, even though the pre-orders often offer stuff like, oh, you can get in 3 days early on the beta or 3 days early on the alpha, or whatever working game test they might release to us. I would be cautious. I wouldn't throw my money at this game before actually getting hands-on and seeing that all the things they said in this article is actually going to come to fruition and they're going to stick to their guns. But yeah, I just wanted to make a video talking about the next Battlefield title and my thoughts on everything that was discussed in the article from IGN, from their interview with Vince Zampella. Let me know what you think about the next Battlefield title. Is everything that was discussed really talking to you? You think it's going to be great? Are you more on the side of cautious optimism? Or are you on the side of, oh, I've given up on the Battlefield franchise, I could care less about what's coming next down the pipeline? Leave all that in the comment section down below. There'll be a link in the description to the full article if you want to go and read it for yourselves. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, thank you very much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.